Welcome to the ABW Project. My name is January Donovan, founder of The Art of Being a Woman. Thank you so much for being here. If you have not signed up for a 4-part free series, please do so and watch the first video titled Our Story to give you an insight on what we're trying to do in this project and really unpack the mission of this project. Today I want to talk to you specifically about contribution. What do you think about when you think of contribution? Most of us, when we think about contribution, we think of something grand. And that grand is usually attached with popularity or number of people that know about it. You know, that unless it's big or unless many people know about it, it's not grand, which is why sometimes, you know, we quietly feel as though, mothers quietly feel as though they're giving up their careers and giving up this idea of contribution because as a mother, it's not really, nobody knows about the things that you all day long. It's not quite as visibly popular. So what I wanted to do today is redefine contribution so that we don't feel as though we're not contributing. And that we can redefine the contribution that us women will have in this world. Because I think it's born out of this need of purpose, which is beautiful because we are born with a specific purpose. So that's a beautiful desire. We're just going to change or kind of take the vagueness out of this word grand, so that we can feel as though our contribution on an everyday basis, okay, does not equate the number of people that know about it. Okay, so let's begin. I want to introduce to you a new word called personal contribution. Now, if you watched our story, I talked about the little girl in the hospital, just born. When you look at her, you think worthy, beautiful, whole, complete. You place no conditions in that little girl, right? And two things happen as that little girl grows older is that we either rob her of her worth or we contribute to her worth. So I want you to start looking at every little girl that passes by, or your niece or your children, and say, I have a role. I either contribute to her worth or either rob her of her worth. And I really want us to have this accountability and a sense of seeing ourselves as a family. That, you know, just because I don't know that little girl or she's not part of my family, that doesn't mean that I can't play a role in contributing to her worth. Okay? So let me just define contribution. When I say the word contribution, I specifically mean adding value to that person. Okay, it's contributing to their worth. We're adding to who they are. So they're born, they're worthy, and we're just adding to their worth. So adding to who they are as they grow, as opposed to robbing them. Okay, so let's unpack this. I want you to think of walking into a room. Now I'm going to talk a lot about walking into a room because I talk about it metaphorically, because as women, we walk into many rooms in our lifetime. Okay, whether it's a first day at school, at kindergarten, or your first high school date, or your first work, or every single day you greet your children down in the kitchen, or you greet your husband. And usually in that room that we walk into are people, okay, that when you walk in that room, you actually present who you are, whether we recognize it or not. Every single time we walk in any room, whether it's every single day, we present who we are. So, and this is what I mean by personal contribution, that every single day you recognize that every you walk in, your role is to contribute to every human being that you could possibly contribute, right? So the opposite of contribution would be the robbery. And I want to just first lay out and recognize that, you know, we all contribute and I think we all rob. we try our best, but we all fall into these traps. I don't think that anybody has not done either of these, contribution or robbery. What I want to point out here is clarity, because sometimes we don't really realize where or how we might be robbing people, or also create an opportunity to contribute to each human being that we come in contact to, which really is a grand contribution. So let's begin. Number one, how can you walk in a room and contribute? A compliment, right? If you wake up every morning and your only task is to compliment every single person that you meet, you would lay in that bed and realize how grand your day has been. If you know that is just a habit of a mind, right? Where you're just finding opportunities to what? To recognize the good in people. And all day long, that's all you're doing. You recognize the good in people. Let's look at robbery. What's the opposite of a compliment? It's judging and criticizing. Criticize. I spelled it right, criticize. Okay. We're going to unpack this further, but for the time being, it's really assuming people's, or seeing women not in context of their story and criticizing them and jumping into conclusion of who they are and who they're not. And this is right here, I think, is really the cancer of our culture. And I'm going to unpack this further because I think it's killing our connection and our joy as women. So for the time being, I want you to see all day long, both in your thoughts and in your actions. Okay, so let me actually backtrack for a little bit. This happens, it has to be a vocal compliment, which means you recognize it and you create habit of the mind in your thoughts, and then you actually vocally compliment people. And I think sometimes we compliment people in our head, but we don't actually vocally or take the time to say something. Well, the reason why I'm going to push for a vocal compliment is because we're getting attacked. Our worth is getting attacked a lot of times by media, by just the images that we see all day long. We're getting attacked and our worth is getting attacked. So what I want to do is be more purposeful in our idea to say, I'm going to vocally and find every opportunity to compliment my coworker, my child, my husband, all day long. That's my task. Now, on the same token, we criticize people a lot in our head and in our thoughts. Okay, here's the bad news. Our thoughts are really conveyed in our actions. So if you're criticizing people in your head, it's not as though people can't experience that criticism in your interactions. That's the bad news. And this is where a lot of the word fakeness or inauthenticity comes from, because what we think about really gets conveyed in our actions. And you can pretend like you're nice, but you're not really nice in your head. It really shows. Or you can temporarily hide it, but people experience that judging. And this is usually from an unrecognized wound, okay? And we don't even really realize that sometimes we're doing it, and it's because we haven't even processed a wound in our heart that really needs to be processed, because we're going to shut a lot of people and we're going to live a life like this, okay? We're like with our fist up, and we can't let goodness come in because we're constantly on guard. And that wound is causing us to judge because it's a sore spot in our head. And it's no secret, you know, and you can do your own homework, that usually what bothers us with people, what bothers me about certain people is usually something that bothers me about myself, or it's a recognized, or it's a wound that I know that is just a sore subject, or based on my story growing up, okay? So that's enough of that. So number two, what's another personal contribution we can do when we walk in any room is we acknowledge, okay? We communicate people's significance. We really let them feel as though we accept them for who they are, and that we don't place conditions, right? The opposite would be condition, conditional, which means I like you, or I'll be nice to you if you believe in the things that I believe, you know, which is why we have a very difficult time imagining that somebody who has the opposite belief of you, you could sit down, enjoy a nice glass of wine, have a great conversation, and really learn from each other. Because we place conditions on people. Unless you believe in the things I believe in, I'm going to be on guard. And we really lose an opportunity for what? Kindness, compassion. That we can learn to actually have dialogue and healthy and wholesome, joyful conversations, even though people don't agree or believe in the things that we believe in. You know, and that we can also learn from them and their story. And this is very clear in the media, where everybody's just proving, you know, it's this sort of bickering and everybody's just trying to prove their worth. I mean, I can't imagine sitting down and watching the news and, you know, where they're trying to prove the point and somebody says, you know what, I totally agree with you. Tell me more about why you believe that way. Can you imagine? I would fall off my seat, you know, to have that in our media where people are actually recognizing and acknowledging. Okay, number 3, to motivate. Okay, so what I think, when I think of motivation, I think really pushing people. It's like building people, you know, all day long, if they have things that they feel like they need to do, or we're just building people. We're pushing them along the journey. So the opposite would be doubt, or when we are skeptical. It's saying, I don't really believe you. You know, it's a sort of a disposition where, sure, but I don't believe you. You know, I don't believe it's possible. Number 4 is to encourage. And this is such a beautiful opportunity all day long, whether we write a note for a coworker or we, you know, just even a smile or a look of saying, go for it. You know, I cheer you along the journey. I mean, we can encourage people all day long with our smile and our tenderness in the way we give of ourselves, just by the way we communicate our total self, you know, that kindness. I see sort of, this is pushing people along the journey, and this is cheering people in the journey. The opposite would be cynicism, or just did I spell that right? Discouragement. You know, you discourage people, and it's this heaviness, and you feel as though, that's the only way I can describe it. It's just heavy. You know, it's heavy, and it's already heavy enough of a world where people are already faced with so many negativity that we want to be that light of just joy and encouragement. Number 5 is, this is really pertinent in our culture and also really difficult. To be engaged is to really take the time to be present. In our technology right now, it is very difficult to be present. We are what? Distracted. Okay, whether we're worried about something, we're in anxiety, or we have a million things going on in our thoughts, we're just distracted. And we lose the opportunity to be fully present, to listen and to say, you're important. You know, when you're sitting down and having dinner, or you're having time together and you're doing this, what you're really saying is, you're not as important as the person I'm trying to communicate. We're missing out on the now. And our technology makes it very difficult, and technology is good. But we need to be able to use everything for the good and not rob ourselves of the opportunity to connect and to engage and to nourish our relationships in the now. Okay? So number 6 is challenge. Okay. This is really finding opportunity to foster people to grow. We're going to talk about it in a different time, but in order to truly be happy, we need to be growing. That we're actually on a journey, okay? That being stagnant allows us to we create this resentment in our hearts. So we want to, you know, encourage. And I think right now there's a lot of indifference. You know, as long as you're not bothering me, you're okay, we're okay, I'm not going to challenge you. And I will say that this is really seeping into friendships, where we can sit down with our friends and have hearty, healthy, wholesome conversation where we're challenging them to grow. And we can sit down and say, listen, I love you enough to know that this might be hurting you. But what you choose to decide, I will walk with you. How can I help you? Difficult conversations with the people that we care about. And to challenge them, but to also be with them as we challenge them. That we're not saying, I don't care. I don't care if you grow or not. We have to care. We have to start caring. Number 7, optimism. Okay? It's really saying, I hope in you. And I will the good for you, and I want the best for you. Okay? And the opposite would be pessimism. Okay? And a lot of times in our dialogue or in our approach, there's sort of a sarcasm or it's cynicism, you know, where we don't really believe we want the best for them. And I think this also plays in with sometimes we could really be nice to people and we're really judging them in our heart and our mind, and we can't really stand them or we don't really like them. And it shows really in our actions, and you really cannot hide it. You really cannot hide it. Now, I'm going to pause for a second. I want you to also consider that when you have an unprocessed wound, even if people are contributing, complimenting, acknowledging, motivating you all day long, you can't receive it. You know, why? Because you're on guard and you don't know why. So even if I compliment people, even if I acknowledge them, we're like this and we hear it, but we don't really believe it because there's a block in there, okay? Which we'll talk further in this project. Number 8 is to share ourselves with people, to be vulnerable enough to share our stories and our journey. Why? Because it helps people along the journey. It's a source of encouragement, and it says, I get it. It's a source of empathy, and it's a source of saying, oh, you get it, and you're walking with me. And then I think because we live in this world where we have to be cool, we don't share ourselves. And we're afraid because what they might see is the imperfect vision of what you hope they would see. So we don't give of ourselves. We don't share who we are with people. And guess what happens? We live really in the surface. And we never get nurtured or never go deep enough to be able to have wholesome connections with people. Okay, so this I would say withhold. And there's a coldness in there and also sort of a numbing. Numb. And a lot of times we numb and we don't really even realize why we're numb. And it's that unprocessed, unrecognized, and unresolved wound. Okay, so number 9 is awareness. This tender awareness where we walk in any room, we see people's needs or we recognize, you know. And I remember my first job, my boss, Omar, which you're watching, I worked, you know, and I would come into work and I was always just happy, you know, I love going to work and I enjoy the people that I work with. But I think one time my parents were going through something difficult, and I think 2 days in a row I was just sort of down, and you could tell I was down. And I still remember him, you know, looking at my desk, and he says, January, are you okay? I can tell that something's not right. And it was a tender moment of a recognition. It was sort of this fatherly recognition of saying, I'm aware, I know your normal self, and you're not your normal self. Are you okay? You know, even for us to just be aware of our coworkers or even, you know, our children or our friends or sisters, are you okay? Is everything okay? And it's that tender awareness that really makes a difference. It says, you see me, you recognize me, you notice that I'm important. And I remember he says, hey, I want you to go home. Just go home and get some rest. And I thought, what beautiful moment of tenderness, where I feel like my boss was able to see me as a person and not just somebody who worked for him. And it was personal. It was a personal contribution, and I still remember it. It was 12 years ago. Okay, so here is being self-absorbed. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory, where you just go about your day, and you don't notice people, and you don't recognize, you don't notice the things that are going on. And it's easy to do that when life is rushed. It's easy to do that when life is rushed. Number 10 is learning from people. Now, I love this word. The mentor that I spoke about 15 years ago, and she always said, January, every person that you meet, you learn one thing. And I want you to know that people are so much more dynamic, and you can learn so much more than you can learn on paper. And she says, you don't walk out without picking up one thing, whether something you don't like, you learn from it. And every person you learn from. And that every person is a walking wisdom, and you carry that with you, and it transforms you. And how beautiful is it if we can teach ourselves to learn from every person, and even for people that we feel like that was a really encounter that I didn't like, and from that you can still learn and gain from it. Okay, so this one I would say no interest. Okay. Number 11, I want you to put on your own personal contribution that might be unique for you, or your job, or where you are in your stage in your life, or what could be the opposite of that in the robbery. Homework is, if you could write this in your wall and look at it every single day and decide, which one am I going to do today throughout my day? And I grab an index card and I fold it in half. And on the right one is what the personal contribution is, and the left one would be the robbery. And I either stick it on my vision board or I carry it in my wallet. I do this personally myself. And what you do is that you can't erase without replacing, so you replace these things that we all fall into, and you put forward, and you change a habit of the mind. Because this really is I think a lot of people just think, oh, I'm my cup is half full, half empty. I'm just sort of, down, or Debbie Downer, or that we assume that judging is just part of life. Well, it isn't. It's just a bad habit. It's a bad habit that we have picked up based on our culture right now and how we are pinned against each other. That's where we're forced to judge. I call judging sort of a numbing pill, because it gives us a split second of feeling as though we're better than someone, because all day long the images remind us of our insignificance. Okay, so take the time to look at this and pick one thing that could transform the way you live as a woman. Thank you so much for walking with me and talking with me. I'm grateful to walk this journey with you.